Pretty sure Omnath, Locus of all is broken commander. The deck's absurdly powerful, outrageously fun to play, and combines 3 different strategies into one giant Phyrexian elemental monster. Hope you enjoy this ridiculous deck, and if you do, please hit the like button down below. His name is Steven, helps out a lot. Omnath, Locus of all is a 4/4 legendary creature Phyrexian elemental with a rainbow color identity and a Phyrexian black symbol in its cost. If you would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes black instead, which means that while Omnath is on the battlefield, your mana pool literally never empties. So if you would lose mana at the end of any phase or turn, you do not lose it just becomes black. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you look at the top card of your library. You may reveal it if it has 3 or more colored mana symbols in its mana cost. If you do, add 3 mana in any combination of its colors and put it into your hand. If you don't reveal it, put it into your hand. So basically, Omnath is drawing you a card on every one of your pre-combat main phases. The only thing that changes is whether or not that card comes with 3 free mana or not. These 2 abilities are beyond powerful, so much so that they warp deck building. Not only are we going to play monstrous X spells, and not only are we going to abuse the landfall mechanic in terrible ways, but thanks to Omnath's Phyrexian black color identity, we get to run an entire land recursion package as well, a triple threat that's never been able to exist to this degree. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We're going to start by supporting Omnath's first ability. Hoarding mana is a big deal in any deck you make with Omnath at the helm, which means we need some insurance in case Omnath, Locus of all can't survive consistently. Omnath, Locus of mana protects all your green mana. Crewfix, God of Horizons, and Horizon Stone both turn all your unspent mana into colorless. Making sure we have at least one of these on the battlefield at any given moment is both important and also not that hard to do. The plan is to gather as much mana as possible. What do we do with it? Whatever the heck we friggin' want. Debt to the Deathless and Torment of Hailfire rain down pain and suffering on the table, either draining away double life or forcing mass sacrifice and discard. Try to keep in mind that every single card we talk about that has at least 3 colored symbols in its cost synergizes directly with our commander. Entreat the Angels will create a massive angel army. If we can miracle it, even better. Genesis Wave floods the board with powerful permanents and a ton of lands. Both of these are basically win conditions, and notice the colored mana symbols. We're also running Distorting Wake because banning Upheaval isn't enough, at least against this deck, and Villainous Wealth because, let's be honest, it was basically made for this strategy. Omnath is hungry and requires a large amount of mana generation. Seedborn Muse, Awakening, Bare Umbra, and Wilderness Reclamation are going to untap our lands, letting us tap out over and over again for potentially dozens of mana per turn without a lot of work. Then when we are tapping our lands, they will produce even more mana thanks to Mana Reflection and the Omnath trigger-friendly Nyxbloom Ancient. And then, when all of this seems like just too much mana, an almost aggressive amount of mana, Doubling Cube is there to double it up, and Seedborn Muse untaps all permanents you control. That includes the cube. Maybe dozens of mana per turn wasn't correct, maybe it's hundreds. This may look like standard practice up to this point, but thanks to Omnath's color identity, a land sacrifice and recursion package can be included. Braid's Arisen Nightmare, Knight of the Reliquary, the Gitrog Monster, and Lord Windgrace. Braid's Stone Rains the board or drains and you draw. Knight of the Reliquary fixes you in a savage way. The Gitrog Monster is an amazing payoff. Some big mana decks don't normally get to run because they aren't black. And Lord Windgrace is just plain broken to pieces, card advantage and ramp machine. Then, hiding behind them, Sylvan Safekeeper. A quiet and unassuming nightmare for your opponents, effectively keeping our commander from being targeted forever. Yeah, we have the resources to do that. We're playing lands, generating loads of mana, then throwing those lands away. Let's bring them back. Perennial Behemoth and Crucible of Worlds basically make our graveyard a second hand. Splendid Reclamation brings everything back with no fuss at all, and the big house Ancient Green Warden performs a double function, well, triple really. Not only does it come with Crucible of Worlds on a stick, and not only is it a 5/7 elemental with reach, but it also doubles up land triggers. I wonder where we'd ever find use for that. The third prong on this trident of pain is Landfall. Royal Elemental synergizes with Omnath and will take over the entire board if left unchecked. Rampaging Balos will create a Jumanji-like amount of 4/4 beasts, I guarantee it. Morog, Fury of Akhom, I'm pretty sure just doesn't ever stop attacking. We have ways to get extra lands on the battlefield, so Morog is a game winner, especially with the plethora of giant tokens we're going to have running around. Tatiova is card advantage incarnate, no real need to explain her inclusion here. Tireless Provisioner isn't the most exciting landfall creature, but it makes treasures, and we want treasures. We want them real bad. And of course, you had to know this deck would never be complete without the army of Omnath, Locus of Rage, of the Royal, and of the Creation, all in here. Creating elementals to go along with the handful of actual elementals in the deck, using those elementals to damage targets, making the elementals bigger, then attacking with them like a giant wave of aggressive mana. It's so good. I'm getting super hyped just talking about it. Oh right, Omnath, Locus of Creation is going to create 4 mana a lot of the time. That adds up and doesn't leave the mana pool, just saying. Triggering Landfall is cool, triggering it multiple times, also cool. In addition to Ancient Green Warden we already looked at, Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, obviously made her way into this deck. She helps us and really hurts everyone else. To take advantage of all these triggers, we should be dropping more than one land per turn or else it's just boring, am I right? Azusa, Lost But Seeking, Dryad of the Elysian Grove, and Cultivator Colossus are bomb creatures to help us flood the board faster from either our hand or most of the time our graveyard as well. The Colossus is also deliciously synergistic with Omnath, is a giant trampler, and will keep drawing cards as long as you play lands. It's just so absurd, I can't even handle it. Farseek, Cultivate, Tempt with Discovery, every single fetch land, Evolving Wilds, and Terramorphic Expanse. Even more ways to trigger landfall additional times per turn. All of this just stacking up to be an immeasurably powerful strategy, but again, we need more. We need early mana, we need fixing. The deck needs to get out of the gate relatively quickly, even in casual games. Ignoble Hierarch, Noble Hierarch, solid mana dorks. They're assisted by Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Felwar Stone, Chromatic Lantern, and Commander Sphere. None of this is surprising, but in addition to this rainbow ramp and support, this particular strategy calls for something a bit more tailored. Victory Chimes and Braid of Fire, both technically ramp, but also very unfair. Victory Chimes untaps on each untap step, and you can choose yourself every time. 4-player game, that's 3 colorless mana you get when it isn't even your turn, assuming you have a mana hoarder on the battlefield, of course. And then Braid of Fire. Looks like nonsense, right? Printed 3 years before Mana Burn was removed from the game, I'm sure designers never expected it to be used quite like this. Kept on the battlefield for infinite turns, generating more and more red mana until the game is over. Dropping this on turn 2 is so sweet. The value package in this deck is a little different than most due to Omnath's unique trigger. We're running 2 tutors, Rocco, Cabaretti, Caterer, and Beseech the Queen. Both trigger Omnath's free mana. Rocco can grab any creature you like, Nyx knows you'll have the mana for it, and it hits the battlefield immediately. That's so good. Then Beseech the Queen only cares about the number of lands you control, and I mean, come on, have you been watching this video? We're fine. For non-Omnath based removal, we went big. Supreme Verdict and Doom Blast, both strong as heck and both are Omnath approved. Then narrowing this down took a long time. The charms. There are many of them. They are all useful in their own special way, but for this deck, in this moment, Dromar's Charm and Obscura Charm are the ones we could afford to fit and the ones we want the most. Dromar's Charm is an Omnath-friendly counterspell, and Obscura Charm not only counters an instant or sorcery we don't like, it can also destroy a smaller annoyance if necessary. Would have loved to include more charms, but this list is tight. We have one additional piece of fixing in the deck in Sylvan Scrying. Can grab any land. Cyclonic Rift is here in case our X spell Upheaval doesn't send the message clearly enough. Spell Burst is a counterspell I'm pretty sure was begging for a deck like this to be made. With all the floating mana you'll have, you can use that floating mana to protect the reasons why you have floating mana and then buy it back because again, so much mana. Heroic Intervention is a staple that protects all our stuff. At some point I imagine someone is going to try to wipe the board after you miracle and entreat the angels for 42. It's a nice way to stop that. And then Lightning Greaves, because if you look at our new Omnath dad, the one thing it really needs some boots, obviously. This deck is 5 color and relies on fetching, so as many fetchable duels as you can get, put them in. Obviously, if you have the original dual lands, run those, but I prefer to, have a place to live and food. The 3 color fetchables we're running, the entire Triome and New Capenna cycle, all 10 lands. This may seem like overkill, it isn't, trust me. If you have them, run them. We're also running 7 Shocklands, Breeding Pool, Godless Shrine, Hallowed Fountain, Overgrown Tomb, Sacred Foundry, Stomping Ground, and Temple Garden. Then there's the Rainbow Lands. Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, Mana Confluence, and the World Tree are all too diverse not to include even if we can't fetch them. The deck is primarily green, so Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth is a strategic include here. Always need to be able to generate green mana, and then for the few cards we have that specifically fetch basics, the last 5 lands are one of each basic land. If you want to budget this down a bit, the land base is very expensive. It's more than half the cost of the entire deck, so focus on shifting the expensive lands to some cheaper tri-lands and cheaper fetches. The New Capenna common fetches like Broker's Hideout and Riveteer's Overlook are great budget options, and the tri-lands from Tarkir, Frontier Bivouac, Opulent Palace, these will help keep your mana consistent across all colors. You can also remove Cyclonic Rift. Distorting Wake does the job well. Rift is more of a second option. Crucible of Worlds can be removed for Ramanop Excavator or Conduit of Worlds, or both if you don't have an Elish Norn, Mother of Machines. Just doing those few things lowers the cost of the deck by 60%. And of course, Omnath Locus of All itself will be cheaper once it's released, so you can work on getting your deck together now and maybe wait a week or 2 after release for a more realistic price point. Regardless, this deck is great fun and I know you'll love it. Which new commanders do you want me to tackle next? Hit me up in the comments, and thanks for watching. Now go smash!